Welcome back to Upside Down Data. Let's talk about Chainlink and where Link might be heading next. So with Link, when we look at the price action on its own chart, it doesn't look like anything too crazy has been going on. We see this candle here, we had pretty big wicks to the upside and the downside. But if you just looked at this in isolation, you wouldn't really think that much is going on. But of course, we're not going to look at this in isolation. One of the things that's been happening over the last few days is Bitcoin is going absolutely crazy. We're now trading above 60K, 61K as I record this here. And that is very useful context because one of the things we know often happens in the crypto markets is that Bitcoin tends to move first and then altcoins tend to follow. And so with this setup here, it seems possible that what's going on is that Bitcoin is kind of sucking the liquidity out of the room in the crypto space. It is basically pulling money into it, driving up. Then we might get to a point where people start taking profits off of Bitcoin, and then those profits flow into other crypto assets. And that's where something like Link might really be able to benefit, especially with a lot of the different narrative drivers that Link could have going for it. Seems like a logical place for at least a portion of Bitcoin profits to eventually end up in. So what I want to talk about right now is what is the setup for Link, that if we do see those flows, are we set up in a point where upside potential for Link is in a good spot where it could really move off of some kind of a situation like what we've been talking about. So let's go ahead and get into that. So I like to talk about our models and what they're seeing with the asset to give us an idea of where things could be going, especially in light of the fact that we might have some very bullish tailwinds for Link not too far in the future if some of these profits do end up going in that direction. Okay, so let's talk about some of our models that we have here at the channel. So this is our short-term upside downside potential indicator, or UDPI. It's a risk model, so higher values mean higher risk, lower values mean lower risk. And it's reactive to moves that play out over days to weeks, so pretty short in its time horizon. And what you'll notice here is that we're actually down at around neutral on the short-term UDPI for Link. We've gotten all the way up to about 2.5 on this push up here, and that was in contrast to getting up above 4 in this one here. Both of these pretty elevated risk levels. Historically speaking, they're points that have often acted as local tops, especially when you get all the way to the top of the scale. The top of the scale is 5. We got very close to that here. This is a very logical place to have consolidate for a while before we could push back up again. But the good news is that this is a relatively low risk level, especially in a bull market. And I think with Bitcoin being where it is, it's hard to argue. It's very hard to argue, in my opinion, that we're not in a bull market, especially if Bitcoin breaks to new all-time highs soon. Then it's basically, it can't be, that doesn't happen in a bear market. You don't get new all-time highs. And so given that, then we're kind of looking at this place where if you look at prior bull markets, especially when you're in the middle of it, these points where you dip below 0 have been pretty decent relative value zones for Link. And so it's very possible that that could play out again. And we could even see short-term risk cool off even more here. Again, if Bitcoin keeps moving like it has been, it might suck a lot of that liquidity into itself, or people might actually sell altcoins to be buying Bitcoin. Some people may even sell their Link to buy Bitcoin. But what that might just mean is it's an opportunity. And if you see the short-term risk continue to cool off even lower, that opportunity might just look bigger and bigger and bigger. So obviously not financial advice, you should make your own opinions. It's one of the things that I'm thinking about though, and that's the way that crypto tends to work. It's rotation, and tends to be the big movers, especially Bitcoin, goes first, and then that money flows down into smaller market cap assets like Link. So something to keep an eye on, but we're certainly sitting in a reasonable place right now from a short-term risk perspective. We've cooled off notably, and we're set up for a decent amount of upside if that demand shows up, as we've been talking about. Okay, so another model we can look at is our trend confidence indicator, or TCI. So this is a model that cares about the trend of an asset, as the name implies. And really what you want to look for with this model is what is the price doing? What's the trend of the price? And how is the TCI reacting in response to that? If they're trending in the same direction, so you have an uptrend in price and the TCI is also moving up, then that suggests that that's a healthy uptrend that is reasonable to expect to continue. But if you start seeing a divergence where, for example, like here, a really aggressive move down the TCI while price kind of either goes sideways or slightly up, that's a concerning sign, suggests that we probably need at least a little bit more consolidation. But then when you see that reversal back to the upside, that's a bullish sign. And so what we've seen here is we saw this reversal, price then moved up. We basically saw that reversal early as a warning that price was probably going to start moving up soon. It did. We then saw a bit of a move down here. What I'll be looking for is, can we go up then and set in that higher high? Can we keep an overall uptrend on the TCI here, set in this as a higher low, and then set in a higher high? So that's what I'm going to be looking for, to think that we're just going to be going off to the races with Link. If that doesn't happen, if you see the TCI continue to move down here, that might just mean that we need more time to consolidate down here with Link before being able to make that move to the upside. So it's going to be data dependent how that all plays out, but that's one of the things I'm going to be looking for. But certainly the setup is here that we could just continue going and this confirm it with a higher high here. Also wouldn't surprise me if some more consolidation might be needed first. And that also would make sense that if Bitcoin continues to suck the air of the room, Link might also just need more time to consolidate anyway, because really few altcoins are probably going to do anything too crazy in that kind of environment. Some obviously will, but not the majority of them, most likely. Okay, so now though, let's flip over to longer term data, because that's what I think most of us care about with these things. That it's always, interesting to get the short-term perspective, what's going on and what to look for. But really, if we're in a full bull market, that's kind of what we care about. We're in a bull market, then how high could we go till we get to that cycle top or close to that cycle top? Because that's really where most of the profits are going to be made in a bull market. It's the people who buy at the bottom and then sell at the top. And it's easy to kind of get sucked into the short-term volatility, but then that can just lead to over trading and ultimately worse returns if you just held that whole time. So obviously not financial advice, just use whatever strategy you think is best, but that's one of the things that you can think about. And we look at the long-term UDPI for Link, it's also sitting at a pretty decent spot right now. It's a bit higher than the short-term UDPI. It's up here at 0.6, but it's at levels that are not too different from what you'd expect to see in a bull market. And so that's one of those things where, again, if we see that profit taking, or if we see that surge in demand suddenly for Link, we're at a position where it could definitely run higher. In this run up here, we got all the way up to about 3.6, 3.5. Definitely seems possible we could go there again if that shows up. But if you see this start to cool off, that would be more that scenario where things need to take a little bit longer for altcoins to really blast off. But that would just suggest a better opportunity, more upside relative to downside potential in that longer term. But by no means do we look overheated right now. And I think that's the good sign, is that we're set up in this kind of neutral position where if Link wants to go now, it could certainly go now. If it wants to cool off more, that's fine, probably just a better opportunity. But we're not at a point where it seems like a notable top is likely to be forming, and certainly not at the extreme highs here where notable tops, or at least close to the notable tops, have formed in the past. So that's a hopeful sign. It just suggests that the market's not overheated yet, and that's what you want to see, especially with this bullish backdrop, that if you have an asset that's not yet overheated, then this can be the catalyst to make it go into that overheated zone. Okay, final thing I want to talk about in terms of models is our forecast model for Link. So this is a model that outputs the probability that Link's price will be above where it is right now 6 months in the future. That's what this is estimating. And so you can see it does a really good job of capturing these dynamics. That in a bull market, it's very bullish throughout the whole time. But then as you go to the all-time high, and as you're kind of moving out into the bear market, it gets super bearish, and then down, down, down we go. But then, notably, it got really bullish all the way through here, really coming up into these points. And then especially as we got to the actual bottom on Link price over here, getting up to a 91% chance of upside in 6 months, it was saying. And through this whole time, as this was happening, I was being very vocal about this here on YouTube and over on X, about how it was just a matter of time for Link before something would happen. Indeed, here we are. And the good news is it remains very bullish. And so that's where I personally am not flipping my bias. I don't see any reason to. I think the data across what we've looked at say that a bullish outlook makes sense. And so until the data suggests otherwise, I'm not going to be flipping my bias personally. Now, this isn't a 100% chance of upside this model is estimating, but it's a heck of a lot better than down here at 9% chance of upside or 7% chance of upside down here at the bottom. Currently, it's estimating around 94% chance of upside 6 months from now. And so that's really what I'm looking at with Link right now, is that when you look at just the chart, it's a little bit deceptive of what the underlying conditions are, both in terms of a market perspective of what Bitcoin has been doing, what that might mean for broader markets once it's done putting in its moves. But then also when you just look at the other data for Link, generally speaking, they paint a pretty good picture, or at very least not negative, in the sense that we're not overheated short term, we're not overheated yet long term, and the kind of medium to long term outlook remains bullish. And so that's where I think it's just going to be a patience game. I think some people are going to get frustrated. They're going to see Bitcoin going crazy and say, hey, what the heck? Why isn't Link going crazy too? But what it might just mean is that that's the opportunity. That's the accumulation zone before it's ready to go ahead and make its move. So not financial advice. We'll have to see how this shakes out. And obviously this is all data dependent on these outlooks. So the data change, my outlook would change along with it. But right now the outlook looks quite bullish. And so that's my main takeaway looking at the state of the market right now for Link. So if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us over on X. A lot of updates about our models more over there. And go to our website, PolarityDigital.io, to see live data from our models and more.